At exactly 15:47 hours local time on July 13, 2026, the false calm over the southern lane of the Strait of Hormuz was shattered without warning. The ADNOC-flagged Very Large Crude Carrier Mombasa B, fully loaded with 2 million barrels of crude oil and crude by Indian and Ukrainian nationals, was transiting the U.S. designated Southern Passage through the world's most critical maritime choke point. Ahead of her, the sister tanker Al-Bahia carved the same course, both vessels operating on coordinates cleared by U.S. Central Command and monitored by the Coalition Maritime Operations Center in Bahrain. Their AIS transponders were broadcasting. Their course was legal. Their crew had done everything right. They never saw the missiles coming. In a matter of seconds, 2 Iranian cruise missiles, later confirmed by the UAE Defense Ministry to be launched by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, slammed into the hulls of both supertankers simultaneously. The Mombasa B took a direct hit to her superstructure. Fire engulfed the accommodation block. An Indian crew member was killed instantly. 4 others suffered critical burn injuries. 6 Indian nationals and 2 Ukrainian citizens were pulled from the smoke. Both 300,000-ton vessels, representing over $400 million of oil cargo and steel, were left crippled and ablaze in Omani territorial waters, their radar signatures turning from moving contacts to emergency beacons in the span of 11 seconds. Oil prices spiked 9% within the hour. Aviation safety agencies across Europe issued emergency airspace advisories. And at the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, the Combat Information Center went to WARCON 1. This was not a random escalation. This was the trigger event in a carefully rehearsed Iranian operational sequence that had been building for 6 days. And what the United States was about to unleash in response would permanently change the nature of naval warfare. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand what Iran was actually doing. When Tehran signed the Memorandum of Understanding in mid-June and allowed the Strait of Hormuz to briefly reopen, Western analysts breathed a premature sigh of relief. But the IRGC was not standing down. It was resetting. It was reloading. Intelligence intercepts, later confirmed by CENTCOM, showed that in those 3 weeks of relative quiet, the Guards rebuilt their coastal radar network on Abu Musa Island, redistributed their land-based anti-ship missile batteries across multiple hardened sites from Bandar Abbas to Konarak, repositioned over 40 IRGC Saraj-class fast attack craft in shallow water ambush positions along both coastlines, and, most critically, seeded sections of the northern transit lane with naval mines. Iran was not negotiating in good faith. It was preparing for the second round of a war it believed it could win by strangulation. On July 7, 2026, that second round began. The IRGC struck 3 commercial vessels transiting the U.S.-designated southern route in rapid succession. The Marshall Islands-flagged tanker Al-Rikayat, the Saudi-flagged crude carrier Wedyan, and the Liberian-registered LNG tanker Cyprus Prosperity. The attacks were precise, coordinated, and executed in a 40-minute window designed to overwhelm coalition escort response times. Each vessel had been tracked by IRGC coastal surveillance radar at Saronic and Jask for over 2 hours before the order to fire was given. The message to the international shipping community was explicit. Iran controlled the strait, and any ship that refused to request authorization through Channel 16 and deviate to the Iranian-approved northern route would be targeted. The IRGC was not just attacking ships, it was attempting to replace international maritime law with Iranian sovereign control over a waterway that carries 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas. At the same time, something far more dangerous was happening underwater. U.S. Navy. MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, equipped with AQS-22 airborne laser mine detection systems, began reporting acoustic anomalies consistent with moored mine signatures in the Northern Passage. The contact reports fed directly into the Maritime Operations Center's Common Operating Picture, painting a picture of a 3-dimensional kill zone. Surface missiles from the coast, fast attack craft in the shallows, and mines on the seabed, designed to force every commercial vessel into a narrow corridor where Iranian patrol boats could enforce compliance at gunpoint. It was a stranglehold, executed with a chilling methodical precision that CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper described in classified briefings as the most complex Iranian maritime coercion operation since the tanker war of the 1980s. The United States had already been responding with strikes since July 7th, but those first 3 nights of operations, while destructive, were tactical. The targeting packages focused on visible IRGC military infrastructure, drone launch sites near Qeshm Island, coastal radar stations at Saronic and Jask, missile battery positions at Bushehr and Konarak. Precise, proportionate, and, until now, not enough to break the kill chain Iran had built over 18 months of preparation. After the Mombasa B and Al Bahia were hit with their civilian crew burning on the water, President Donald Trump made a decision that would reshape the war. The gloves were coming off. At 16:45 hours Eastern Time on July 12, 2026, CENTCOM launched what would become the most operationally significant strike wave since Operation Epic Fury began in late February. The targeting package covered 6 major Iranian military nodes simultaneously: Bushehr, Chabahar, Jask, Konarak, Abu Musa Island, and Bandar Abbas. US F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters from carrier Air Wing 9, operating off the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, flew deep into Iranian anti-access envelopes at high altitude and released GBU-53/B Stormbreaker glide bombs against hardened radar sites with a precision margin measured in inches. EA-18 G Growler electronic attack aircraft riding shotgun on the package flooded Iranian S-300 fire control frequencies with coordinated jamming that rendered the entire Persian Gulf coastal air defense network functionally blind for the duration of the strike window. At the same moment, U.S. Navy destroyers in the Gulf of Oman launched BGM-109 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles, weapons capable of retargeting in flight against moving contacts through active RF seeker heads, against dispersed IRGC fast attack craft repositioning under the cover of darkness. Dozens of Iranian patrol boats, once the spearhead of Tehran's maritime coercion strategy, were reduced to burning wreckage scattered across the dark water. But the weapon that changed everything was not in the air. It was cutting through the water at 35 knots, barely visible above the surface, guided by satellite and autonomous navigation algorithms, carrying a 1,000-pound warhead toward a target the Iranians believed was protected by their port defenses. 3 Saronic Corsair autonomous surface vehicles, 24-foot fiberglass hull drones built in Texas and fielded under a $392 million CENTCOM production contract signed just 7 months earlier, were vectored simultaneously toward the submarine and ship maintenance facility at Bandar Abbas Naval Base. This was not a test. This was not an exercise. This was the combat debut of a weapons platform that had never fired a shot in anger. The world's first operational unmanned surface vehicle strike. CENTCOM released footage within 24 hours. 3 small, fast silhouettes converging on a raised dry dock, containing what appeared to be a Gutter-class midget submarine under maintenance. The first Corsair impacted the dock facility at the waterline. The second detonated against the submarine support crane. The third hit the repair pier directly, triggering a secondary explosion from stored fuel and ordnance that sent a column of black smoke visible from satellite imagery to a height of 3,000 feet. The Iranians had invested heavily in that facility. It represented their ability to regenerate the undersea threat, to get their mine-laying submarines back into the water, back into the strait, back into a position to close the choke point for good. As of July 12, 2026, that capability was gone, and it was destroyed without a single American sailor in the kill radius. The strategic implications of what happened in those 48 hours extended far beyond the immediate tactical math. Iran's maritime kill chain, the carefully layered integration of coastal radar, land-based anti-ship missiles, fast attack craft, mines, and submarine regeneration capacity, had taken 18 months to build. CENTCOM dismantled it in 4 nights. More importantly, the combat debut of the Corsair USV signaled a seismic shift in how the United States intends to fight and win maritime wars in the 2030s. The risk calculus for future adversaries just changed permanently. You no longer need to put a sailor in harm's way to destroy a hardened naval facility on a hostile coastline. You program coordinates, release a drone boat, and watch the secondary explosions on satellite imagery from a command center in Bahrain. Simultaneously, the diplomatic architecture was collapsing in real time. Iran's lead negotiator, Brigadier General Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, issued a statement declaring that the Islamic Republic was now engaged in an essential and existential war with America, while simultaneously signaling that negotiations were not closed. The contradiction revealed the depth of Tehran's strategic confusion. The IRGC believed its maritime coercion strategy would force Washington to blink, that the threat of a global energy crisis, oil at $100 a barrel, and civilian tanker crew casualties would produce the same political paralysis that had protected Iran for decades. What they didn't model was the possibility that the United States would not just respond, but use the conflict as the operational testbed for a generation of autonomous naval warfare platforms that had been sitting in classified development programs waiting for exactly this moment. The Corsair was not the only platform, it was simply the first one revealed. By July 14th, with 4 consecutive nights of strikes completed, and the Bandar Abbas submarine facility reduced to wreckage, CENTCOM reimposed the full naval blockade of Iranian ports. More than 20 U.S. Navy warships, destroyers, cruisers, and the carrier strike group built around the USS Abraham Lincoln took up blockade positions across the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. Within the first 24 hours, the blockade interdicted 2 non-compliant commercial vessels attempting to reach Iranian ports and disabled a third, an empty oil tanker bound for Qeshm Island, Iran's primary crude oil export terminal and its most critical economic lifeline. The financial toll on Iran was staggering. CENTCOM assessed the blockade was costing Tehran $500 million per day. Global shipping insurance rates in the region tripled within 72 hours. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency directed commercial airlines to avoid airspace over Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the UAE. The world's most important maritime corridor had become, in the course of 1 week, the most dangerous body of water on Earth. Iran's response options were narrowing by the hour. The IRGC released a claim that it had struck U.S. military housing, weapons storage facilities, and a satellite communications hub at a base in Bahrain. CENTCOM denied any damage. Iranian state media separately claimed IRGC attack drones had struck an accommodation building and equipment hangar at the Al-Azraq Air Base in Jordan, where F-18 fighters were allegedly stationed. Multiple open-source analysts confirmed the claim was unverifiable and inconsistent with known U.S. basing patterns. The pattern was familiar. Iran was using media warfare to project strength it no longer possessed on the water. The coastal radar network that made their missile strikes possible was gone. The fast attack craft that enforced maritime coercion were burning. The submarine maintenance facility at Bandar Abbas was rubble. And U.S. sea drones, autonomous, expendable, and terrifyingly effective, were already being repositioned for the next tasking. What you have witnessed this week is not simply another round of strikes in a long and complicated war. It is a strategic inflection point. For the first time in the history of naval warfare, an autonomous, unmanned surface vehicle has been used in a combat strike operation against a hardened military facility. The Corsair's debut at Bandar Abbas is the 2026 equivalent of the first use of radar-guided bombs, or the first GPS precision strike. It tells every naval power on Earth, China, Russia, North Korea, that the future cost of threatening a U.S.-designated maritime corridor is not just airstrikes from stealth fighters or tomahawks from destroyers. It is a swarm of autonomous weapons you cannot see, cannot negotiate with, and cannot deter with the threat of casualties, because there are no casualties to threaten. The human is already out of the loop. The Strait of Hormuz remains under blockade. Iran's nuclear negotiating position has weakened further as its conventional military capacity erodes. Ghalibaf's statement that Iran will fight on the battlefield and the negotiating table simultaneously reflects a regime that has run out of clean options and is improvising under pressure. President Trump's warning to strike power plants and bridges if Tehran refuses to return to the table reflects an escalation ladder that has not yet reached its top rung. The Houthis, emboldened by the conflict, have already launched their most serious ballistic missile barrage against Saudi Arabia in years, striking Abha Airport and threatening regional airline routes, adding another front to an already multi-theater crisis. The rules of this war are being written in real time by the nation that controls the most advanced autonomous strike systems on the planet. The message from the Arabian Sea is unambiguous. You can close a strait for weeks, you cannot close it forever. And when you try, the response will come not from a sailor looking through a periscope, but from a drone boat you will never see until the dock you spent 18 months building is on fire. The question is not whether Iran can be deterred. It is whether any adversary on Earth has correctly priced the cost of challenging a military that now fields weapons with no crew to mourn and no prisoner to capture. What would you do if you were in Tehran right now? Comment below. And if you think the Corsair's combat debut is the most significant naval development of the last decade, drop a 1. Stay sharp. Stay informed. The next phase of this war begins the moment Iran decides how to answer a blockade it cannot break and a weapon it cannot kill.